This is a 1969 Subaru 360 that I am turning into the ultimate miniature rock crawler. It started its life as a K-car from Japan, and it currently sits on Suzuki Samurai axles with four-wheel drive and custom four-link suspension front and rear. I'm on a mission to get this thing driving, and we have a ton of work to do before then, so I better hit the garage so we can get this thing together. I'm back working on the mini crawler build, and I've got a ton of things I need to get done today, and most all of it revolves around steering. I want to be able to steer this thing, rightfully so, and in order to do that, I need a ton of major systems that all need to work together. We need a steering box that's going to be steering the wheels and very securely attached to the frame. That has got to go up through a steering column to a steering wheel. That has to go somewhere where I can reach it from a seat comfortably, that I can also reach pedals for the gas and brakes. That doesn't sound like a huge deal, but we are working with very tight spaces in this thing, so it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, which is why I have two of everything to hopefully make it easier getting stuff mounted in this chassis. I don't know what I need, and I don't know when it's going to make the most sense, so I figured get more than one. I've got two steering assemblies, two steering boxes, two pedal assemblies, and two seats. I'm going to start with what I think makes the most sense, and that's me as a driver and where I'm sitting. I need to be comfortable reaching all of the controls, steering, pedals, shifter, stuff like that. So I'm going to start with the seat, and we're going to build everything around that to make sure that it makes sense with where I'm sitting. I've got two seat options, so we're going to have to figure out which one makes the most sense. I'd like one that's padded and reclines, but this one's pretty bulky and that one's a lot smaller, so I might end up going with the non-reclining all aluminum Kirky if it makes more sense. Let's dive in and find out. Moving into the cab, well, there's not much to work with. I'm gonna need to get a seat right about there. Hopefully I can make one of the seats make sense. The only other concern I have besides this left to right is, well, this bar. It's pretty low. There's not a ton of room in the cab of this thing, and I might need to adjust that bar so I have enough headroom and I can get in here with a helmet. We'll find out. First things first though, I'm gonna pull this door off. We're working right on the other side, and that's gonna make things a ton easier. So, ton more room to work now. Let's get figuring out where we're gonna put this seat. That's just kind of what I have to work with. So I'm gonna go pull both those seats around and see if I can get either or one of them to work. Here's the seat I would prefer to put in there. It's a pretty big seat, so I'm gonna throw it in there and see if it even looks like it might make sense. It'd probably clear the door. I don't know. Oh goodness. Okay. Steering wheel? Steering wheel's really only got one place to go. Oh, with a helmet, I would be hitting this top bar. I can't go back any further, really. I guess I'm gonna go pull the aluminum seat around and see what it looks like, because, well, this might work, but I don't know how well it'll work. Oh. Plus, getting in and out of this thing is gonna be a nightmare. Surprise, surprise, it fits better. Oh, let's see. I haven't actually sat in this thing, ever. Never had the desire. Does have a, oh, I could get with this. Okay, I mean, this already gives me my pedals. This is the seat I'm going with. The one issue that I foresee is I can't see much at all. Oh God, that's gonna be a challenge. My line of sight is pretty well through the bottom of this thing. I've got everything cleaned up and I've got the welder out because I think it's time to start tacking these seat brackets in. Got two simple seat brackets down here. This is gonna be super basic. I'm just gonna tack it in place for now. I'm not even dead set on keeping the aluminum Kirky forever, but I think for now, it's the best option I've got, so I'm gonna use it. I'm gonna tack it in place. That's gonna give me a starting point for pedals, a steering wheel, and everything else. And hopefully after that, things should move quickly. I'd say that seat's installed enough for me to start getting some other things figured out. Now that we've got the seat tacked in and it feels pretty good, I need to get a steering wheel, and in order to get a steering wheel, we're gonna need a tie bar across the front of this roll cage, which is also gonna be our top motor mount. So about 3 birds, 1 stone. Let's get her knocked out. Here's what I'm talking about when I say I need a bar across here, and it's gonna serve 3 purposes. 1, I need a bar across here to tie the cage together, suspension points together, and just keep everything super strong. So it's gonna do that. 2, I need this top motor mount. And in order to get this top motor mount in here, I need something to bolt or weld it to. That top bar is also going to provide this. And finally, in order to get a steering wheel mounted in here, I need something to mount it to, and this stock dash ain't it. So I'm gonna be putting a solid 1.75" tube between the roll cage bars. That's gonna give all 3 of those things a solid solution, and hopefully we'll be able to mount a steering wheel and give me an idea of where I can mount a steering box. All right, I think that's what I'm looking for. A nice solid bar across there that'll give me some more support with the roll cage. I can either weld these directly to it, or I can make some tabs that'll go off of this to bolt to this. And it'll be a nice solid spot to mount a steering column. I quickly whipped up a couple little tabs to weld to the bar in the cage for the steering column. I think this is gonna work well. I then welded some 14mm bolts into them to create some studs. So this should function as a factory-esque steering column where you raise it up onto the studs and everything works out well. Now I'm gonna jump in there, figure out where makes sense on that bar, and then try and get it tacked in place while sitting in there and holding this in place. Should be a pretty interesting one, but I think that's gonna be the best way to get this thing in place and in the right place. This is decent. Well, the real question is, can I get out if the steering wheel's here? Ugh. Now that I've got a couple tabs and studs mounted up here for a steering column, the next thing I need is a steering box. Here I've got the 2 steering boxes I'm contemplating using. This one is obviously a little bit beefier, and it's got the capability for power steering, which would be cool in the future. But this one has a couple advantages that I really like. For starters, the pitman arm actually goes the opposite direction that the steering input is. So the steering input comes from this side, and the output goes forward from there, so this steering box doesn't have to be in front of the steering, it can be behind the steering. That's a huge benefit for placement and keeping this out of harm's way. Second is the mounting structure. This uses 4 mount bolts, and all 4 of them are on the same plane. So I can make 1/4 inch plate and have a couple 1.75" tubes that die into it, and that'll hold this thing super strong and I won't have to worry about it. Whereas this one has 2 mount points this way and 1 mount point this way, which I'm sure is stronger in a proper application, but I would struggle to get a solid mount point to both of these while also maintaining a nice low profile and keeping the frame rails out of the way. This one being smaller isn't necessarily a bad thing. We're working with a really small vehicle. This thing isn't heavy, it isn't super big, and all of the parts don't need to be huge. As I was looking at these steering boxes, I saw a couple things that might help me improve this steering box. For starters, this pitman arm that came on there has a ball joint built in, so the wear item has to be replaced with the whole pitman arm. Not an ideal design and not really what I wanted to do. Plus, this is absolutely destroyed and blown out already. So I was looking at the one off of the beefier box and I thought, well, I wonder if that would fit onto these splines. And as a matter of fact, it does. So we can use this pitman arm that's just a normal tapered end and this is not gonna need replaced. This gives us two advantages. One, this isn't a wear item, and two, I can drill this out to use Heim steering, which is a little stronger than your typical ball joint steering. But for now, I can just use normal ball joint stuff and make myself a tie rod with parts I've got lying around. So I'm gonna put this pitman arm on this steering box and start figuring out how we can get it tied to this axle and the steering wheel that is sitting right there. Kind of a lot resting on getting this absolutely perfectly placed. So I'm gonna start by getting this pitman arm on the steering box. That requires centering the steering box and then placing this perfectly on so that it has equal travel left and right. Well, I wasn't thinking things fully through. Although this pitman arm does go forward from the factory, I didn't think about the fact that this factory application steering is behind the axle. Meaning, when you turn right, this needs to move the pitman arm left. That way, the back of the tires move left, which moves the front of the tires right. In the front of the axle, if you turn it right and it moves the steering left, you're gonna turn left. And I don't want backward steering. What that means is this steering box is also going to have to go in front of the axle, just like that one would. But this one is a ton smaller and more compact. Plus, with the no power steering already, it has got 6 revolutions on the shaft of steering movement left to right, whereas this one only has 4. Those 2 extra revolutions make it easier without power steering, and we wouldn't have power steering to start out anyway. So I'm just gonna go with this, and in the long run, I would like to eventually upgrade to full hydraulic power steering. I turned the pitman arm around, and now we're ready to start seeing about mocking this thing up, which is going to involve cutting more of the structure out, which is unfortunate because there's not much structure left in the front of this thing. But what I'm going to do, since we're going to have to cut the structure up anyway, is I'm going to unbolt this, which should free up this from this inner structure, and I'm just going to lop the entire inner structure out from up here all the way to over there. All of it's going to be gone, and we're going to be officially just a shell. That is the last real Subaru 360 structure that was left in this thing. Here, I am extremely temporarily mounting the steering box directly to the axle to give me a better idea of where I want to keep it and hold it there while I build the frame in place. I've got this steering box very rudimentarily mounted where I think it's going to make sense. It currently has the pitman arm very barely clearancing the tie rod on the axle at full clearance. So when this is furthest back, the tie rod's going to be furthest forward, and they won't meet even with a tie rod end in there. I double checked. So now I need to figure out how to get the steering wheel attached to this. This is the steering wheel we're using. I cut the column down a few inches so I could get an idea of what I could work with. Before, all I had was this nub, and it wasn't gonna work very well, so I cut all of this off, and that left me with this. This is a nice weldable shaft that I can adapt to, and I went and pulled this off of a 2nd gen 4Runner I have in my yard because it has a U-joint. I need a U-joint. There's a ton of angle between this steering box and where the actual steering wheel goes, so we're gonna need more than just a normal rag joint, which is where this entire shaft comes in. So I was looking at this and I thought, man, it looks like it would just, and it does. It actually perfectly sleeves together, but after looking at it, it's still too long by a few inches. So what I plan to do is I'm gonna cut this off about here, and then I'm gonna sleeve it in, and hopefully everything works. If we can make this the right length, that should, in theory, give us everything we need to adapt this steering wheel to this steering shaft to a steering box. Now, as you'll see, the steering box is pretty darn low and is kind of ugly, so I don't know how that's gonna stay forever, but for now, it'll turn the wheels left and right, and that's really important because that's what I'm looking to do. I'm gonna go ahead and start shortening this, get it all set up and mocked up, and if we can get this to actually move the steering box left and right without binding super bad from the seat, that is a huge step forward, and I can start making some permanent mounts. I already cut out this 1/4-inch plate that we bolted the steering box to, and that's gonna allow us to have a couple 1 3/4 tubes weld to this and hold it perfectly stout without any issues. We're gonna have to tie those tubes all the way up into this frame up here, but I think we'll be able to do it. With the steering box mocked up, now I can start getting a permanent mount. The big thing I was worried about was making sure that the steering wheel was gonna have a good connection to the steering box, and I think this is gonna be a fine location. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start by getting a tube bent. I want a 90 that's gonna come out, around, and up, and tie in about where this down bar ties in. I want to keep it nice and strong. So I actually already bent that bar up. This is just about what I'm going to go for. We're going to have this drop down and tie into the steering box right there. It's going to be a nice solid connection. And then I'll have enough room above it for another bar that can come over and tie in on this side of the chassis. Hopefully this works all right. After fighting the notch for a little while, I finally got something that fits nice in here. So this is gonna tie in there and to the 1/4-inch plate on the steering box, hold everything super stout. A second piece of 1 3/4 tubing will fit on top of this 1/4-inch plate, and I'm gonna try and wrap it around all the way to over here and get it as far over as possible so we have good solid left to right articulation. The further away that the two mount points are, the more roll resistance we're gonna have. So I'm just trying to make this as strong as possible. So I'm gonna go ahead, tack this one in there, and the steering box should be held in place to the chassis. I've got the first bar tacked in, and the steering box is sort of kind of started to be mounted. But I need to get another bar in here. So I bent one at a 120-degree angle, and we've got this bar that's gonna tie in right like that and give us a super solid mount point. That's also going to give us enough room that the steering's not going to ever get in the way. I'm going to go ahead, tack this one on, cut off my temporary mount that goes to the axle, and then start figuring out how this feels and if it feels like it needs a bunch more support or not. Wow, we've got a steering box mounted on this thing, and it feels pretty dang solid. I might throw another gusset in here somewhere or another tube. I'm not exactly sure. But for now, I'm really pleased with it, and I want to see about getting this thing mocked up for steering. Down here, I've got half of an IFS tie rod for a 4Runner, and this is working really well for what I need. I've got the steering box lined up, I've got that cleaned off and this cleaned off, and I don't have the right size round tubing, but I have this piece of square stock that's actually going to be the right size, and I'm really excited to just tack this together. And it's not going to be perfect, it's not going to be pretty, but this piece of square stock will weld in, and it'll give me an idea of how this thing's going to steer. I'll be able to flex it out and see how the steering works and articulates with the suspension. The only other thing besides this little square stock I've got to put in here in order to see this thing turn with a steering wheel is tack weld the steering shaft. Throw a couple tacks on either side of the square stock, and I should be able to sit in the seat, turn the steering wheel, and see the tires move back and forth. That'd be freaking epic. That would be the first time I've ever been able to do that in this car. I tacked everything on the front axle together, and now for the first time, the steering wheel is turning the wheels. We've got full lock to lock on the axle. This is gonna be fantastic. I'm stoked. The only issue is if you look from the front when I'm getting close to full lock, the whole steering box and frame moves. There's a lot of leverage, and I'm sure that I can shore this up with a little bit of triangulation. But for now, it moves the tires and it's a solid start. This front frame rail is not strong enough. You can see the tires start to move after a ton of frame flex. We need to shore that up. That's not acceptable, and I'm not exactly positive how I'm gonna do it, but I've got a couple ideas, and my first and foremost idea is to tie each of these bars all the way back to the bottom frame over there, and that's gonna kind of serve a twofold purpose if it works out right. It's gonna be the base to a solid floor in here, so I can get some metal down and start figuring out pedals, and it's also gonna give us some nice triangulation to the frame itself, the chassis, that the axle is actually mounted to hopefully give us a little bit more stability. It's all gonna then be a giant triangle with this up bar, down bar, and over bar. I'm trying to make as many triangles as possible. Triangles are extremely strong. My very underpowered wood sander. This has gotta be stronger. Gotta be stronger. I feel like it's stronger. This feels crazy. This is actually the most articulation I have ever gotten out of this thing, and that's with the steering hooked up. That's thanks to two things. One, this rear tire got sucked up further into the wheel well than this side does. This side hits the wheel well a little sooner than that side. So we got an extra 1.5 inches of shock travel on that side. Still not fully maxed out, but a ton better. In the front, I clearanced a little bit more of this fender to get the tire further up into the arch, but we got 40 inches under that front tire with all four on the ground. We're up, we got 40 inches under that front tire. About to get dropped off the engine hoist and see how it feels on the inside. She's nervous, I'm nervous.
Oh. Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, that wasn't a terrible rate. Now that we've got steering figured out, the next major thing is pedals. But before I can get pedals in this thing, my feet have nowhere to go. There's no floor pan at all. I wanted a solution. I wanted kind of to use expanded metal, something I could see through. But what I have laying around is a street sign. So I'm gonna cut up this old used street sign to actually fit as a floor pan. I think it'll work well. It's aluminum, it's lightweight, and it'll give me somewhere to put my feet. That's the most important thing. It's gonna block the view. Won't be able to see the rocks. Block me. Yep, that was my thoughts. Wow. I don't know why I'm surprised. I measured and cut it to fit there, but like, looks so professional. And the bottom's gonna be yellow. Yellow gang! And we just need to get some tabs made to hold this in place. I think it looks really good and also feels pretty good driving it. I just put my feet up there. It feels a ton better than having your feet dangling in the suspension. In terms of mounting this, all I'm gonna do is make a few tabs on these tubes and then run a bar across the back for a little bit of support. That should be more than enough. And then I'm gonna riv nut those tabs, bolt this thing down, and our floor pan will be good to go, and we can start working on pedals. This will also give us a way better idea of where our pedals are going and how we're gonna mount them, which is why I've got all of these pedals everywhere and brake parts. And if you couldn't quite tell, I am slightly losing my voice, but that's okay. I'm stoked with how much progress we're getting done on this thing. It's starting to feel like an actual car and not just a pile of parts. I got some tabs in to hold this floor pan in place, and it's riv nutted down. Super solid. I'm stoked about that. And now that we got the floor pan in, the next big thing we need is a brake pedal. This is a 2021 Subaru Crosstrek brake pedal, and I whipped up these tabs and took the entire factory bracket, threw it away.
And I'm gonna just weld these 2 1/4-inch tabs straight to the frame. I'll even gusset them if I feel like I need to. And this will give me a super sweet, solid mount that'll be really easy to adjust and put where I want it. And I think I want it like right there. I want it down at an angle about the same as the tube, and I want it just a little bit over. And that's just to make sure we got plenty of room between the steering shaft and the pedal, but also to make sure we've got plenty of room on the other side because I still need a gas pedal. With the brake pedal mocked up, I have an idea of where I need my gas pedal to be. So I got a gas pedal from a Toyota Hilux. I've got a random engine turner rod that fits pretty well with the factory 4-wheeler throttle. And the reason I'm trying to possibly retain this is just because it's self-contained. Everything here to operate it is self-contained, and I can adapt this to what I need and use a linkage or a cable from this to the pedal and then mount this up in the dash. This works perfect with this carburetor. It moves it the proper amount, and it's got its own stops, so it should work out really well. Then I can just adapt it to get this pedal to work. Now, the reason I'm gonna go with the Toyota Hilux pedal is because it actually bolts to the floor, whereas a lot of modern pedals bolt to the firewall, and since I don't have a firewall here, it would be really hard to connect the pedal to anything, and I'd have to make a giant contraption. With this, I can just throw a couple riv nuts into this aluminum panel. It'll be plenty to hold this pedal, and there's not gonna be a ton of force on it, just enough to pull a cable to actuate the throttle. And that'll give me a cable for the gas. The reason I'm not continuing on putting a brake master cylinder in here is currently all of the brake master cylinders I have are rather large. This is the Toyota Hilux brake master cylinder, and although it's not the biggest thing in the world, it's a little too big for what I need in this application. I went ahead and ordered a Suzuki Samurai master cylinder. I figured that would be proportioned well to the Suzuki Samurai axles, and hopefully it'll be smaller and fit in this really tight space in front of this pedal, but also staying under the hood, because that's kind of important for me. For now, I'm gonna get on mounting this gas pedal and seeing if we can figure out getting a throttle connected to the engine. I think this will work well. So I think I have a temporary solution for my throttle. And the reason I say temporary is because I don't know for sure that this is going to be my forever engine. And I want to make sure that this is modifiable in a way that makes sense and that I can change this to accommodate a different engine easily. And a thumb throttle is pretty well universal. And not only that, but if I don't like this engine and I end up changing it out, I can always put a more permanent throttle solution in. All right, now let's see if I can reach it easily. I hate it, but I love it all at the same time. Okay, and oh. I screwed it up already. Honestly, it's not bad. Let me know what you guys think of this in the comments. Horribly atrocious, or is this pretty clever? Now that I've got gas and brake pedals pretty well figured out, I'm still waiting on a master cylinder I ordered for the brakes. I have one more major control of this thing that I don't have control of yet, and that is the shifter. So I've been thinking about how I'm gonna make it to where I can shift this thing from the seat with my hand with ease. I think I'm gonna modify an engine stand bar. One of these. It's like a almost 1-inch rod, solid steel, super thick because it's designed to turn engines over, so I don't have to worry about it breaking, and it's just about the right length to go under and around the drive shaft so that I can shift over here and it can move the shifter on this side while avoiding the drive shaft right here that's gonna probably be spinning very fast. I think this is gonna work, so I'm gonna start getting to work on modifying this, getting it mocked up, and figuring out how we're gonna get it pivoting. Looking through my pile of stuff, I found a Milwaukee handle. I believe it's from a grinder or a drill or something, but I think this would be a really sweet shifter. It even has a little threaded bar I found with it that'll work good to mount it. So I'm gonna weld or bolt it. I'm not sure, I might bolt it just for ease. And then after that, I need to figure out how we're gonna get it to pivot so I can pull it back to shift the engine up. I need this thing to pivot. This is a wild one, but one of my very early videos, I fixed a Subaru, and what was wrong is this rocker for the cams was broken. But what this rocker is a perfectly machined shaft with things that are designed to spin on it. So this could be a really good pivot for my bar. Not exactly sure how I can make it work or where I can attach it, but I think I might see about maybe mounting this and making it my pivot point. That'd be pretty cool too. Some Subaru parts in the Subaru. Okay, I've got rendition 1 of this shifter in and it works, but there's one big issue. That is a massive amount of throw. What I'm gonna do to combat that is actually just move this hole up in the shifter linkage on the engine itself. That'll give me more throw in rotation for every inch of travel this has, and hopefully it'll be enough. I'm just gonna move it up about an inch or so, and if that doesn't work, I can move it up again. Eventually, this is gonna be heim joints and linkages. This is just temporary to see how things work and get my geometry right. Rendition 3 of the shifter, and I'm liking it a ton more. We're in a lot more reasonable distance between shifts. Now, I'm gonna let this rest till I can get some parts in for this, because I finally got our brake master cylinder from O'Reilly's. So this is a Suzuki Samurai brake master cylinder. It's a ton smaller than the counterpart of the Hilux one that I was trying to use, and it's actually a very similar bolt pattern. I went ahead and started mocking up some plate to hold this in. This plate will actually hold this in perfect. It directly connects to the pedal and just barely clearances the frame up here. I think it's gonna work out well. And this reservoir fits in there nice and doesn't hit anything. So I'm gonna reinforce it a little bit. I've got some round tube I'm gonna tie in back to the frame rail over here and back to the frame rail over here. Make sure this is nice and secure, gusset everything up, and then test brakes. I also went ahead and grabbed some brake line. So I've got a few different chunks of brake line set throughout this thing, and I should have almost everything to get all of the brakes sorted on this. I have the front brake lines all the way up from the axle to the cab and to the brake master, and I have the rear lines all the way to the axle, but unfortunately I need to get some lines bent up for the axle. They did not have the proper length for that, so I'm either gonna have to crimp some myself or wait until they get some in. All right, sitting in the cab, got a gas pedal and a brake pedal. I feel so cool. Now we get the exciting and kind of tedious part of building brake lines for the entire vehicle. The fronts are there and ready to be built. The rears we don't have yet. I should have everything else though, so we should get most of it done. It's exciting. This thing is it's gonna stop soon. That's cool. I could have been spending a ton of time on building the drive shaft or having it made, but I want to get a bunch of other things done first, because I know as soon as this thing can drive, I will drive it. And if it doesn't have brakes, well, I'll probably still drive it. If it doesn't have steering, I'll probably still drive it. So I got to make sure it's completely dialed in before I get it running. Otherwise, there's a solid chance I'll be using this roll cage, and that's not the goal. It's here just in case, not because I need to use it. I've got some random brake lines, both used and new, that I've mocked up across this thing, trying to get an idea of what's gonna work. And I think we've got the front axle somewhat figured out all the way to the master cylinder. And I've got the master cylinder all the way to the rear axle, but unfortunately, I don't have the proper length lines to make hard lines for this rear axle. So we're gonna either have to go buy some more or make something work. Not exactly sure what we're gonna do, but I'm sure we'll get it figured out, because the only thing we have standing between us and a working brake system is some rear brake lines. And of course, a ton of routing, welding, clip making, and hopefully by the end of this, we'll have functioning brakes on our Samurai axles in our Subaru Buggy. This is coming together awesome. In order to get the brake lines routed on the front axle a little better than they are just kind of haphazardly mocked up right now, I'm gonna go ahead, whip the engine hoist out. I'm gonna pick the front of this thing up, and that's gonna give us a ton of room to work, and we won't have to be taking this floor pan out or working around all of the cage that we have installed.
I've got some tabs cut to hold these soft lines in place in the end where they go into the hard lines. I've got some holes drilled in the truss so that we can tack weld some nuts in and hold the P-clips that hold the brake lines in place. So we're about to be able to completely and totally mock up the brakes for the front axle all the way to the chassis, and from there we'll have to drop this thing down and tackle it from up top. The factory Samurai soft lines to some brackets I made that go to some hard lines that go to a T in the center. That T goes to a soft line that goes to a hard line that runs up this upper link, that goes to a soft line at the top of the link that redirects it and points it forward towards our master cylinder. Don't have a ton of room here, so we should be able to get that running rather easy. Then I've got this line here that's off of a 4Runner. It runs all the way from this master cylinder, if I redirect it, down, around, down the chassis to under the seat. We're gonna go from hard line to soft line and do the exact same thing we did on the front axle, soft line to that upper link. We're gonna run a hard line down this upper link to a T that's gonna go to both sides of the rear axle. Really trying to simplify this braking system and make it as just basic as possible. I think it should work out well. I've seen other crawlers with very similar setups and they don't have any issues. We'll find out shortly enough when we get this thing together and I can start bleeding the system and see how it feels. After just a little more work and some scrounging in my junkyard of parts in my backyard, we've got hard lines on this axle from end to end to a T and a soft line. Goes up the control arm to our soft line in the cab. I removed the seat so I could weld tabs to hold everything in place. Everything's got P-clips. Everything is bolted down. We got clips on all of these links. The reason these link clips are not fully welded is because these are not my final links. These are super thin wall tubing. These were just to make sure that the geometry was gonna work. And I do need to get some thicker wall tubing on here before we actually wheel this thing. Then these will be better attached to those tubes. But for now, I'm stoked. Everything is secured in the cab. Yeah, having exposed brake lines right there isn't ideal, but the seat covers them to here. And honestly, I shouldn't be stepping here ever. And if I am, I put it below this so I can put a little guard over it and hide these all the way back. I'm just trying to make sure this thing is as foolproof as possible. And then all the way in the front axle, we're done. End to end. Everything steers, it moves good. We've got plenty of clearance. There's no binding. Even at full steer, we're not rubbing line anywhere. So I'm really pleased with that. This is coming together amazing. I just need to get some brake fluid in this and we should be able to bleed the brakes. I added a secondary gusset to the top of this that wraps around this tube. So if we were to actually push this past, we'd have to rip this off of the entire tube, and it wraps like 2/3 of the way around, over halfway around. It wraps all the way down to here. I don't think that's gonna be happening, as well as our secondary gusset on this side to support it. This shouldn't go anywhere. When you're doing brakes on a budget, it's cool to only spend $25 on brake lines for the entire rig, and then I spent, I think it was like $70 for the master cylinder with a reservoir for the Samurai, and it fits in there nice. Next thing I'd like to get going on in this thing is getting this engine ready to run. I want to get the wiring harness, all of the modules, and everything associated with getting this engine running in here and see if maybe we can get it fired up. If we could get this thing fired up, that would fire me up to get the adapter made, to get this drive shaft going to the transfer case, because that's about all we have left to actually drive this absolute unit. Oh yeah, and you know, maybe a fuel tank, I guess. Oof, fuel tank might be a pain. Don't know where we're gonna put a fuel tank. I guess I didn't really think that far ahead. I'm not worried about it, we'll figure it out. First thing first, in getting this engine wired, I need to get into my box of everything I saved and find all of the essential stuff. I'm pretty sure every wire is pretty much essential on this thing. So we're just gonna grab every single wire that we have and start laying out over the engine. This is so awesome. I got brake fluid and the brakes on this thing fully bled. I went ahead and just took care of it. I don't know how they actually feel going down the road, but the pedal's nice, stiff, there's no leaks. And I'm really stoked with that because that means with the engine running and the brakes bled, it's time to move on to the drive shaft. All right, we already got the drive shaft adapted. I'm gonna throw that footage in because it was really fun to do. I went over to my buddy's house. He has a lathe and we were able to get everything completely perfect, pretty much, as far as I'm concerned. We got the splines to the four-wheeler directly adapted to the yoke for the drive shaft, and it is practically a press fit, and I am really pleased with this. I just got the call that my buddy's available to help me adapt this to this, so we can get the drive shaft from this engine hooked up to this transfer case, and that will make this thing actually able to move under its own power for the first time ever, I think. Let's grab these parts and get over to his shop where he's got a lathe. All right, so we're here. First thing first, I need to get this side prepped to be adapted, which means I'm gonna disassemble this U-joint, get it all taken apart and this completely standalone. And then I might even try and do the same with this, or I might just go ahead and cut the ears off one of these and leave the U-joint like halfway there. We'll see. Making this adapter is going to be one of the most technical parts of this entire build, so I want to make sure I take my time and do it right. I start by getting both yokes down to the bare essentials so I can chuck them up into the lathe and start getting them turned down. The goal is to get the part from the four-wheeler turned down until it fits inside a hole that we turn into the inside of the Suzuki Samurai section. Got it. Once they're both turned down, it should be as close to a press fit as possible, so that when I put these together and weld them, there's absolutely no way for them to not be square to each other.
This is like professional. I think this is probably some of the better work we've done.
Considering this is the first work we've done?
Yeah.
All right, we're talking 4 hours plus of work for this. Quite literally, this is the finished product. We've got the splines that go into the four-wheeler turned down to a perfect fit for the yoke that goes to the Samurai drive shaft, and this is like perfect. And here we got it spinning at 800 RPM. And well, I think it looks good enough for me. It might not be perfect, but I'm beyond stoked. This was made with like this tool, nothing else. And it came from a brain of some dude that had no idea what he was talking about. So I'm really pumped with this. Huge shout out to Jacob. He's a G for letting me use his machines and helping me with his knowledge, because well, I would not have been able to do this without that. I'm very excited. We've got one adapter, and now we're one huge step closer to the 360 moving under its own power. Adapter. This is crazy. It's not welded or anything. Right now, it is quite literally just that good of a press fit that it's perfect. I mean, this is exactly what I envisioned. 10 out of 10 could not have produced this better from where I was thinking it was going to be in my head to where it's at now. But we still have one major issue. This drive shaft is way too long. So I'm going to be cutting this drive shaft up and trying to shorten it myself. I'm gonna start by cutting this about 1 inch from this side. The reason I'm cutting it about 1 inch from this side is because I'm hoping I can sleeve something inside of this to give it some support, and also to help perfectly align these two shafts so that when I weld it back together, it doesn't have a wobble and it's perfectly straight. That's the goal anyway. If I absolutely screw up, what I'm gonna do is take this to a drive shaft shop and be like, hey, I screwed up. I tried and I failed, but I'm really hoping I can get it taken care of here at home.
I've got welders and I've got hopefully everything to make it work. So I'm gonna cut about an inch off of this side, and then I'm gonna trim this side to fit. We're gonna tack it together and see if it works. I have been heavily dreading this moment for a long time. I really don't want to cut this up. It's kind of a big one. If I screw it up, it's gonna really suck. I might have to order a whole new drive shaft to make it work. So we're hoping that I don't screw it up. I'm gonna jump into it and see if we can make something happen. I've got this drive shaft set up, ready to make the first cut, and no going back after I cut it. Although it's not like it's gonna get any less usable, considering I can't use it now. Okay. So now I just gotta play around with these two sides and see what I can make happen. I eyeballed it and I'm cutting it about here. Yeah, that's right, I eyeballed it. I eyeballed it. I can't believe I said that either. But I did. Here we are. Oh, anxious. What's good is that I cut it long enough of a drop off that if this works or anything shorter than this works, I can possibly replace the entire thing with this tube if I get access to a lathe and can turn down the ends of this to get the proper fit on the inside of that. That would be really cool. We'll see. For now, I think I'm gonna just try and sleeve this and make something work. The last cut didn't work. Third time's the charm, right? As a matter of fact, third time is not the charm. I screwed up, cut it too short, and now I have to de-sleeve both of these press-in joints from the ends of the drive shaft so I can retube a brand new drive shaft with the measurements I got, which turned out to be extremely difficult, so I ended up using a torch and ice and a combination of different tools to try and finally get this drive shaft together. And after much fuss, I have a drive shaft. I accidentally cut it too short, got real sad about that. Luckily, in the first cut, like I said, I went ahead and made sure the cutoff was long enough that it would do an entire new shaft. It might not be perfectly square, but as I installed it, I realized that there's a ton of movement in this four-wheeler shaft in all directions. So I don't know how perfect it needs to be. I pulled the seat out to get a better idea of what we're working with and just have more space to work. I spun this thing by hand, and from what I can tell, it's as trued up as it's gonna be. I don't see any up and down movement. And like I said, there's so much movement in this four-wheeler shaft here. I'm more concerned about that than I am this being a quarter of a degree out of perfect. So I'm gonna go ahead, tack this thing up. I'm gonna throw probably two or four tacks on either side of the tube, and then I'm gonna throw a couple tacks on this adapter, and this thing should, in theory, be able to move under its own power. Wild. Went ahead and threw the seat back in this thing, and hear me out, just hear me out. Gas tank? It's literally strapped to the top of the passenger side door, but that's the Honda four-wheeler gas tank going to the Honda four-wheeler engine that ran where it sat, and I should have everything to literally have this thing driving other than the fact that that gas can's empty, so we're gonna have to go get some gas. But I wanna take this thing for a first test drive, and I think we should be able to. I cannot wait to flex on something with this. Just to drive up something. It's gonna be epic. I'm also really anxiously excited to see how this thing does with the four-wheeler gearing to the T-case and everything. We'll see. It might be awesome, it might be horrible. There's only one way to find out. Think it'll do donuts? Burnouts? 4 low, unlock the front hubs, burnouts. I'm down. I'm gonna try.
It's a little doofy with the Honda tank strapped to the door. That's all right. I am too excited to even begin to care about that. I spoke in the last episode about needing to flip my differentials. Well, currently, first gear is backwards and reverse is forward. So we're gonna click it into first, which is gonna be backwards, and get it out of the garage. But first we gotta get it fired up. Huh. It's not a pleasant noise. To any and everyone who said this thing wasn't gonna have enough power with a Honda engine, a Honda four-wheeler engine, I think burnouts on dry pavement prove you wrong. Real life flex, yo! Yeah! It does not feel like I'm even trying on the inside. Also, so much of me wants to put it in like first, second, and third and go backwards at like 40 miles an hour, but that sounds like a recipe for disaster. How does it look? Doofy? Is the square piece flexing? Yeah, okay. So, yeah, you see? I thought I broke that. We broke the steering. Not ideal. So I can start it and then shift from neutral to first, and that'll get me hopefully off of this kind of crazy obstacle, considering that my front left tire and my rear right tire are both touching fender. You know, for being a quote-unquote shakedown run with the steering, the suspension, and the motor mounts tacked in place, the only thing that's not tacked in place is the T-case. I'd say it's doing great. Steering this thing without steering is kind of hard. Do you know that? This thing is geared too low, if anything. Not enough power. Genuinely, this thing's gonna have a top speed of like 7 miles an hour in higher range. And also, I like to point out, steering wheel not in here because I was getting in and out so much. Got this thing back into the garage from an obstacle in the backyard, through more obstacles without steering. Gotta love a little car. We fixed the steering so I could come out and rip it some more, and this thing is practically unstoppable, and it is not even close to fully finished. I love this thing. We're having a blast. So I'm gonna go see what I can drive over and what kind of flex I can get out of this thing. I don't want to do anything too crazy. I don't want to roll this thing or anything like that, but it is kind of fun to just be able to point it at things and drive over. Look at this. This thing hasn't been stopped once. I can't believe how well this thing is doing. The 360 is absolutely killing it. I cannot wait to take this thing on some more burly trails and see what it's actually capable of. It's in dire need of an engine rebuild, and it could really use some bigger and off-road oriented tires, not 28-inch street tires. I can't believe how well it's doing with the hodgepodge of parts I put together. It still needs a ton of work. I want to finish the cage. I want to get things painted out. But I think this thing is going to need to go somewhere a little burlier than my backyard in order to properly test it. Where would you take this thing to properly test its off-road capabilities? Let me know in the comments down below, preferably in the Southwest United States. I can't wait to actually test this thing out. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing, and I hope to catch you on the next one.